The aftertaste it leaves, it's like nothing else that I've ever tasted before. Probably because I'm not very experienced with rum. Welcome to Whiskey and SV. I'm your host Sam, and tonight we'll be drinking some Angel's Envy. Specifically, we're going to be trying the baseline Angel's Envy Rye against a sample of the Angel's Envy Rye Ice Cider cask from a couple of years ago. So let's talk a little bit about Angel's Envy. So Angel's Envy is a Kentucky distiller who produces primarily, and I think maybe exclusively, finished whiskeys. Their base product is the bourbon, which is finished in port cask, is 43% and is pretty much available everywhere. The bottle shape is pretty much this all the way around. Tonight, I'm going to be trying the rye. The rye, well, this is their baseline rye. Their baseline rye is the rum finished rye. It is bottled at 50% ABV, which is significantly higher than the bourbon. I believe it's in the order of 6 to 7 years old. 95% rye, and I assume the other 5% is barley because it's needed for fermentation. Yeah, I think it was finished in the rum Caribbean rum casks for around 1.5 years or so. For the sample here, the actual bottle, the case for this and the bottle for this are super unique and special. I'll put a picture somewhere here or there. Basically, very nice commemorative box plus a frosted glass. This is also 95% rye whiskey, and it was finished for about 1 year in uh, ice cider casks. Now, what is ice cider? It's basically cider, as you know, is alcohol that's made from apples, and ice cider is kind of like ice wine. It's very predominantly a northern U.S. or southern Canada type of cider that is made from apples that have naturally been frozen, so they're usually much sweeter than regular apples. Same with that. It's the same thing happens with the grapes. I think when they pick the grapes for ice wine, they are very they just get these concentrated sweets. So I and in the same way that ice wine is extremely sweet and is like kind of a dessert thing, ice cider is also similar. So I would expect that to be pretty sweet. I have not actually tried this sample before. As you can see, I've tried quite a bit of this before, and I really like it. I think, honestly, practically, I tend to prefer both finished bourbons and finished ryes. And to me, this baseline rye is actually one of my favorite ryes, even though it honestly does not take too much taste too much like a rye because it's just there's just way too much rum influence on it. Price wise, I believe this is around $80, which is about double the price of the baseline bourbon. It's quite high, but it's also like higher ABV, and it's I guess the rum casks are different, so I guess it's justified in some ways. And generally, I think the experience is unique enough that I'm happy to pay that price. In fact, if I ever found out that this is being discontinued, I would definitely go out and buy it. Now, you might also be familiar with the fact that Angel's Envy puts out a cast strength version of this rye every year, and that cast strength version used to come until this year. Both the bourbon and the rye came in really fancy wooden boxes, uh, and they're triple the price. I think the bourbon is in the order of low 200s, and the rye was in the order of like high 200s, and they're usually very rare. They sell out very quickly, and they're marked up in secondary various prices. They're not marked up like hugely, but they're usually marked up at least like 30 to 50% in secondary. So given that I have tried a sample of the cast strength before and I thought it was amazing, but I don't think it's 3 times as good as this. I mean, this is already, in my opinion, really good. And as for this, obviously, it's a limited edition one. I think there was only 6,000 of them produced, so you're not going to find it easily. And of course, if you do find it, it's going to be in the order of $400, like 350 to 400, even more than $400 now in secondary markets. Okay, so without further ado, let's pour some drams here and take take you through a little bit tour of what this tastes like. I'm really excited to try actually the cast strength version. Thanks a lot to my friend uh, for providing me this sample. I don't want to say his name because obviously he may not want to be known, but thank you so much. You know who you are. Okay, cool. So let's start with the baseline and see what it smells like and what it tastes like. Okay, so that does not smell like a rye whiskey at all. It mostly just smells like a rum. This is just like so heavily doused in whatever. That rum cask must have been extremely wet because um, it just you when you smell this, yes, there's a little bit of a minty flavor that reminds me of a rye whiskey, but it's just so sweet and sugary. And I'm definitely not a rum expert by any means, but my brother really likes rum, and I remember when I was visiting him in Canada, he gave me some like really nice rums that he got from Cuba, and it just like it they're very sweet and that character is definitely coming out here. So if I smell this and you didn't tell me that this is a rye whiskey, I would maybe guess that it's not even a whiskey at all. I would think that it's probably a rum. Yeah, super, just very, very like sweet and confectionery, and the sweetness is very much like a sugar cane type of like note, and it comes with that again tinge of um, minty notes about it. Okay, let's try this on the palate. Yeah, that's like extremely unique. It's like a very lingering flavor that's like super unique. Like it just arrives at with like a massive wave of spices, but then like turns sweet pretty quickly, and then there's some woody note to it that's not like it doesn't feel like it's like old or aged or kind of charred wood. It's more like kind of like newer type of wood, and then there's like a dry sort of sweetness about it. Of course, it is a whiskey in the end of the day, so I think like if you're expecting sort of like a Bailey's sweet type flavor, you're that's not what you're getting here, obviously, right? It's more a spicy. It's sweet for a whiskey, right? And it probably tastes again more like a rum than a whiskey. Like for a rye whiskey that's 95% rye, you would expect that probably should be more spicy, probably more like close to like a kind of a the types of flavors that you would expect from rye, which is like mostly like spicy, minty. There's some mintiness here, but it's like mostly just very sweet. But I'm a huge fan of how this tastes just because it's so unique, and the aftertaste it leaves, it's like nothing else that I've ever tasted before. Probably because I'm not very experienced with rum, but I really dig it. I think it's just super cool. Uh, and yeah, so for 95% rye whiskey, that's aged about 6, 7 years old for $80, $90. I think this is great. I would really, if I found out that this is going to be discontinued, I would definitely bunker a few on. Okay, so enough about the base one. Let's move to the special edition one, which again is going to be right now. If I wanted to acquire a bottle of this, I would have to pay 4 times as much. So, is it really 4 times better? What is the experience like? So let's go for it. So, okay, completely different. Like nothing at all is the same about this experience. Like I guess to be expected because all, as we know, all of Angel's Envy's products are finished, and these finishes have nothing to do with each other, and they're usually so different that like you just don't get the same experiences. So this is a much more sophisticated experience. I feel the rum, it's just like rum in your face, very very rummy, um, and This is more traditionally what I would recognize as a rye whiskey that is like, older, or at least like aged in like specific casks that like give it some specific character. So this one is at 107 proof, which is 53.5%. So it's only 3.5% more than that, but the sweetness on this is a little bit more sophisticated. And I think like generally, this is also not a huge rye whiskey that comes across as like super like dill or whatever else, right? It's like still pretty sweet. The sweetness is different for sure, but it's still a 95.5 rye, meaning it's 95% rye grain. So, but extremely different. Yeah, this has some grassiness to it as well. This is much more closer to a bourbon lover's rye whiskey, I think. Okay, let's try it. Hmm. Interestingly, I don't think this is as unique as this one. Um, it's very nice. It's you know, you get those concentrated kind of like sweet notes, a little bit of like that herbalness to it, but definitely not as much as this. And then the finish is, sort of like that oak sweetness. I wouldn't, I don't think I necessarily like get any apples on it. It's definitely like fruity in some ways, but not really apples. There's a little bit of a kind of bitter tinge from the oak on it, but overall, like obviously you get the spicy notes from the rye, and then the sweetness from whatever else it is that they're doing to it, probably from the apple cider. And yeah, it's very enjoyable. But would I pay 4 times as much for this when I can have this readily available for a quarter of the price? I don't think so. I think if this is a nice shelf piece, if I had the bottle, it would look nice on the shelf. But would I pay $400 to experience it? I don't think so. Yeah, it's very nice. It's definitely like a great whiskey. I just don't think it's like worth the price, given how difficult and expensive it would be to acquire right now. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this non-blind episode. I, probably should. These are so different that even if I'm like totally wasted, I could tell the difference. I just don't think there's any subtlety, especially about this one. This one is just like drenched. It would be nice if I was doing like a super blind tasting of this one to know how it stands next to like some really other some of the other ryes that I really love. I still have half of this left, so hopefully at some point in the future I'll do an episode where I'll put this in some sort of blind and see how it stands. But for now, I think if you haven't tried the baseline Angel's Envy Rye, you should at least try it in a bar once to see if you like it. I mean, $80-$90, it's definitely not cheap, right? But it's not that expensive either. I mean, if you're in this hobby, you already know it's an expensive hobby. Maybe split a bottle with a friend or two and try it, or try it at a bar. Probably if you try it at a bar, it's only going to cost you like 20-25 bucks anyway. So if you can split with a couple of friends, then you get a little bit more time to spend with it, and you get a better idea of what it tastes like. And if you're anything like me, then you probably will find that it is enjoyable because it's different. And yeah, and if you're into rums, then definitely you'll love it. So anyways, I'm going to stop rambling. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much. Please tune in again next week when I'll try to do more interesting content. Take care and see you next time.